Good evening. This is Eric Moore of the Town Meeting Study Committee. Today is January 13th, 2025. It's just after 7 o'clock. Sorry to be running late, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. First order of business is a clerk for tonight. I've not attended to that ahead of time. Katie, do you think you'd be able to clerk tonight?
Sure.
Please? Thank you, Katie. Katie Bresnik will be clerking tonight. I'm going to go into to take roll, please. Most of us are online. I'll start with the folks. Well, I'll start alphabetically as usual. Keith Bergman, please.
Present.
Thank you, Keith. Katie Bresnik, please.
Here.
Thank you. Kristen Haggerty, please.
Here.
Thank you. Alice Kaufman, I see you online, please.
I'm here.
Thank you. Eric Moore, present. Parashar Patel is not expected to be able to enter our meeting tonight. So Mark Parashar is absent. Phil Swain, thank you, Phil. Chase Thompson just informed me that he'd be unable to attend a meeting tonight due to family illness. So Chase is absent, and Eric Van Loon is traveling and will not be available tonight. I do see Cameron online, ex officio. Hey, Cameron, thank you for joining. And Carmen said that she would be joining probably about 15 minutes late. With that, so do we have a quorum tonight? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. Our agenda tonight, a lot of updates and maybe a decision. I hope so. I'm going to move first though into public comment to see if there's anybody from the public who would like to comment in our normal comment period. It's just committee folks here in the room. I'm looking to see if there are any hands online for public comment. Seeing none, I'm going to move forward. You guys okay?
Yeah.
So the next step then is to approve minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes received. Minutes from our public forum, October 22nd last year, from Parashar Patel. Our minutes from October 12th last year, Alice Kaufman, and then our minutes from December 9th from Kristen Haggerty. I'd like them. Are we okay with approving the minutes altogether?
Just one thing, thank you for adding my name, because I forgot to sign respectfully submitted by my.
2 G's though.
Yes,
Yeah.
if you can correct that.
Yeah.
Or do you just think?
Yeah. So let me recall what we need to do here. I'd like to take a motion to approve all 3 minutes in one vote. So moved. Thank you. Okay, I'll open discussion on the minutes. Is there any additional discussion on any of the minutes? Seeing none, I'd like to take a vote then on approving these 3 sets of minutes, October 22nd, November 12th, and December 9th. I guess I need to poll everybody since we're online. Going back to our roster. Keith Bergman, this is a vote to approve all 3 minutes, please.
Aye.
Thank you. Katie Bresnik, please.
Aye.
Kristen Haggerty, please.
Aye.
Alice Kaufman, please.
Aye.
Eric Moore, aye. Parashar Patel, absent. Phil Swain, please.
Yes.
Great, thank you. And again, Chase and Eric Van Loon are not here, so those are approved. Thank you. Moving right along. So let's see. I'll provide an update on. Oh, what else do I have here? Yeah, so I'll provide an update from Eric Van Loon, who has met with on behalf of Eric Van Loon. So Eric, over the past few weeks, has either met or talked with our representatives, Senator Cataldo and Carmine Gentile, and as well with our state senator, Marty Barron, and also with a few other representatives, including the representative representing Lexington. And his bottom line is that the language for the warrant article that we had last year, pretty much, is what we should be going with again this year. I'll explain that. But the recommendation is to go with what we had for last year. as a recommendation, as an ask to the select board to approve for this year for the upcoming town meeting. He sent me a copy of the text, that, he recommends, and that's gone, through Carmen, our moderator, it's gone to, the town council, for review before we present that to the select board on the 27th. I think the interesting thing that's going on is that, there's a bill, House 4771, which is a sort of a broad bill around, basically for all public meetings in the state, being hybrid. The discussions that he's had indicated that, while it makes sense to pursue the same strategy that we in Wayland and Lexington have had of an independent home rule petition, it's possible that this coming year, we'll see this other bill sort of supersede, what's being asked for. So that's all, it's all interesting. I think it's odd to me though, I'm sort of reading through, the different petitions, is that the petitions don't really talk about voting. They talk about meetings and hybrid attendance, and in the Massachusetts, House 4771, they talk about, not forcing people to have to pay to participate, but just in the language of the different petitions, if you see anything about voting. So I think, when Eric gets back, and we have a chance to follow up, I'd like to understand that perspective a bit better. Because it feels like a little bit like a loophole. But I don't know, this is not my stuff. So just to sort of put a button on that, we have something to present to the select board. It's going through town council review right now. And the broader picture is to stay tuned. Phil?
Where did the language come from? Was it the petition? There was a citizen petition last year for remote participation. Is that where this language came from?
The language that we're proposing for this coming year is consistent with the citizen petition from last year.
Okay, so that is where Eric is recommending. Okay.
Yeah, and
fine.
that process and that process, the language for that, I think, was the product of a process of a principal review. And I think also alignment with like David Carr and David Allen.
Okay.
Their work through Wayland. Or Rick Wayland. So in other words, it's been vetted. But yeah.
And then as far as voting goes, it might be that voting is implicit in the word meeting, town meeting and so on, like, if, one of the things I did this past couple weeks was look at the state statutes on town meetings. And, they talk about having meetings, and I think among the things that go on at town meetings is
Right.
votes.
Yeah. Well, there are different kinds of meetings, of course, but,
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I believe remote participation, that was sponsored by Scott Gillis.
Scott and Mark Martinez, it was a complicated, right? I know Scott's on the call.
But I mean, that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah,
That language
yeah,
of remote
yeah,
participation.
So let's see, if we get Carmen online. I think I'd like to hear from her a little bit, for the discussion around clickers.
I mean, there's not much
Yeah.
else we need to do on remote participation. That's a recommendation of this committee. Like you made it the select board language we have. We probably shouldn't have much more to do on that. Is that correct?
Other than the warrant article, I think that's correct. Yeah.
And by the warrant article, we recommended the select board, I think you're going in January, later this month, and you say,
27.
this is the language that was used last year, we'd like, you to move it, right? And then we're just kind of like off our plate,
I think
other
so,
than
yeah.
kind of be appearing in the
I
report.
think so, yeah. Alice Kaufman, see your hand up, please?
Thank you. Do you have the language in front of you that you could reread it to us? I don't see it in the minute package.
No, it came in late. I'd have to fumble for it. Can let me get back to you, Al. Well,
I'll try again.
Check.
It would be in the warrant,
Yeah.
not just
Yeah,
the
and
slide.
you have it in your email, that I think is CC'd to you and Carmen. Shannon will bring it up, in a second. Let's come back to that, Alice, okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'd
The
like
reason
to-
I was asking is understanding Eric's comment about the question is not only what does remote participation mean? And does participation mean a form of voting is permitted remotely? And I think
Right.
the intent of the article, and as you just raised it now, if it doesn't address it directly, does it need it?
Right.
At Lexington with a representative town meeting votes remotely.
So actually, Alice, I do have it in front of me. So the Wayland one, right, section 1, notwithstanding general laws. We can hold annual and special town meetings with voters located in common physical location, fully remote and partially remote. So by specifying annual town meeting, then voting is a piece of that. So I missed
Yep.
that, since my
Yep.
bad.
Okay,
The Lexington Home Rule, representative town meeting is called out explicitly. So again, my bad in the reading.
okay,
So
that's
with that, then we know that voting has to be involved. So that answers that.
okay.
So, good, thank you.
Clarification.
Yeah, but the 4771 though, to my scanning again, doesn't mention town meeting. So.
It says, right, it says any public meeting,
Any public meeting.
which town meeting might be considered a
Would be-
separate.
Yeah, and to Phil's point, it's a meeting, so. But yeah, so to be continued. Good, thank you. So Cameron Kennett, welcome. So you emailed me on Wednesday, and I have to apologize for not doing an adequate job of getting, making room for a real discussion around clickers. What we think an evaluation will be, for not making real room on the public agenda for a discussion. That said, I'd like to get an update from you and to hear
Yeah.
questions you have for us, and we can see where we can go with that. I'm anticipating that any substantive discussion will have to happen next week or next meeting. But so please.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Yes,
I'm coming through. Okay, great. So yeah, I just wanted to pass along really because at last Monday's select board meeting was not intended to talk about clickers and town meeting. It was not an agenda item. However, in the weekly operations report from the town manager, there was a paragraph saying, and I'll just read, it's very short, it's a couple sentences, saying, ARPA funds have been identified to conduct a pilot program to lease clickers for town meeting on June 1st, 2025. The pilot will provide the opportunity to evaluate the user experience and effectiveness of the clickers. So when Carrie went through that, I was just asking a couple questions around, that sort of language, right? And saying, hey, okay, if it's a pilot, how would we evaluate the pilot, and how would we make sure we got enough usage to understand the experience and the effectiveness. And then Carrie was saying, well, hey, I think I'm going to be meeting with Carmen. I would be wanting to use them for Carrie would think we would want to use them extensively in the meeting in order to really sort of gauge the effectiveness. It then started to get into more of a conversation around the topic. And I think Mary Hartman, our chair, just kind of said, hey, time out. This isn't an agenda item. And in fact, the town meeting subcommittee is coming back to the select board, and we will ask them about how they view sort of this implementation of clickers, and what their opinion is on how it would be used effectively in a meeting to understand the experience. So that's really it. As I wanted to pass that along, is that it sort of came up, that it started to open again up the questions, some of which we've discussed, right? Or I've heard discussion of with the town meeting subcommittee here about, is it a pilot, or are we just, moving forward? Are we using it for some votes? Are we using it for all votes? And so, Mary kind of said, well, we'll ask the TMSC what they think when they come back again. So I really just wanted to kind of tee that up and make sure that there was awareness there.
Good, thank you. So let's see, I mean, we did have a vote, to recommend, use of clickers, that they may, it was not a unanimous vote, but, to recommend use of clickers. And then on the meeting, on the, November 25th, we talked about whether or not to make a recommendation around how clickers were to be used. And I think that discussion really wound up focusing on the value of clickers for making secret ballots happen. But at that time, we didn't, and I think you said this in the select board meeting, Cameron, at that time, we didn't make a recommendation around a policy for using clickers beyond they're really helpful for secret ballots. So I think, you know, if I'm not sure what we'll say, you know, at the select board meeting 2 weeks from now, other than beyond that. I think that it's an interesting question as to how do we know if clickers are working well for town meeting? Kristen, I think you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just like to sneeze. Cameron, I appreciate
Yeah.
asking, you know, how we're gonna know if they're effective, because I think we thought about that too, and what we kicked around was user experience, right? So this end of meeting survey, you know, how was your experience using this? And then we could also look at increased participation, you know, that's not gonna be causation necessarily, but we could do that. It won't be a good representative sample because we'll only have 1 year worth of data, but that's something that we could evaluate also. So I think what we determined was that the use of electronic voting isn't likely to increase participation in and of itself, but it might increase the satisfaction of user participation in there. I guess the qualifier that I would have, and that I hope you bring up at the select board meeting, is, you know, I think I heard the number 14,000 or so ARPA funds were gonna be for leasing this year. And because it wasn't in the budget, and you know, clearly if this is a pilot and it gets evaluated, I think it might, I'm not sure where it's gonna fall into the budget cycle for the following year. But I guess I would want the select board to discuss what's gonna come off the plate if we choose to do electronic voting, right? So that all, you know, we can all decide what are the trade-offs, right? Is it worth it to have slightly more time saved if that's the case? And how much is it worth? Well, it's gonna cost us $50,000. And so next year, we're not gonna do $50,000 worth of this. And the reason I say that is because the select board is in this tough place where people are really saying we need to be fiscally more responsible and kind of tighten our purse strings a little bit. And this is one of those things that this would be nice to have. And I think that's our recommendation. It would be nice to have because we think that, you know, some people, not every person, but you know, there's a group of people who will feel more comfortable, whether hopefully those people attend, right?
Mhm.
And so I think this is a nice to have. And so what are the other things that are gonna fall off of the budget that are also nice to have, but this is not the year we're gonna have them? So, you know, the leasing with the ARPA money, what I heard is there's ARPA money that has to be allocated. It was allocated for this. There's no other, you know, money in the budget for this, but this gives us a chance to, us being the select board and the town manager, a chance to evaluate, you know, how much it would cost in the future.
Thank you. I think one thing comes to mind in listening to you is that we can look at how much things cost for a better town meeting. You know, we have a rough idea of what clickers cost to lease this year. We have a rough idea of what clickers cost to buy over, you know, some three-year period or whatever. We're gonna be talking more about what it costs to have multiple locations for town meeting. We're gonna be talking more about what happens if we split town meeting up over multiple nights, over multiple weeks. So the sort of the I don't know what the word is, but the trade-offs around things like that categorically makes sense to look. Do we want to look at our clicker spend compared to benefit or the impact of multiple locations? Or is there a rationale for a larger budget for town meeting? Those economic trade-offs, we don't own them, but I think that it's reasonable for us to make judgments about what makes meeting better.
Okay, yep.
What provides the most value.
I like that.
So-
I like the idea of, you know, we can, you know, have some
Yeah.
information about a number of things and then,
Yeah.
you know, the budgeting entities can decide.
So I'd like to come back to that for a future agenda item. to look at trade-offs that way, and maybe the select board would find that valuable. The other thing that comes to mind, just in terms of how do we know, how do we conduct, you know, I think that one question about clickers is just, you know, do they slow the meeting down or not, right? We know that for some things they're gonna be faster, and we don't know, but we suspect that for other things, they're either as fast or possibly slower. And so I think, you know, the positive outcomes for clickers are that if we have them, you know, we see, more, you know, if we have them and we have a secret ballot or a counted vote, then we know it'll be faster. So how likely is it that we're gonna see that? The downside for clickers is that they might slow things down. I don't know that. So I think, you know, for us to sort of be a little bit clearer about positive and negative outcomes that we want to be sort of attuned to with using clickers this year, and that we address, you know, sort of user experience satisfaction through the post-town meeting survey, those things come to mind. I don't think it's a question of sample size in terms of the number of votes, perhaps the variety of motions that are approved on the floor. I don't know. Any other comments about this or questions? Cameron, any follow-ups from you?
Well, no, I guess my only I'm really thinking, I mean, I hear all that discussion. I think is it 2 weeks from today on January 27th?
I think so.
Yeah, that's a select board meeting, and then we meet again the night after the 28th.
Well, that's, yeah, I guess, so I guess it's just more of a tactical question. So on the 27th, when,
Yeah.
when Mary Hartman or somebody says, oh, okay, so Eric, town
Yeah.
meeting subcommittee, what's your, you know, what's your viewpoint? What's your sort
Right.
of, do you have a proposal or a viewpoint? Just sort
Right.
of, how does that get articulated?
Right. I think
There's no right or wrong answer. There's no sort of like, you must show up and say X. It's just, I'm just giving everybody like the heads up. The question is going to get asked. At least that's what it coming out of last week.
Well, I'd love to be determinative, but I think what I'll say is what we said tonight, but hopefully a lot more concisely and a lot more cogent.
There is a specific resolution that we voted on that has language that sort of has the specifics of the recommendation. So that should be presented. If it should probably be presented in advance, but.
That was presented. I think that, you know, Cameron's point was, so if I'm understanding correctly, the recommendation was, you know, get, you know, electronic voting, so the town manager is kind of moving to that. And her words were, you know, did we say as a pilot? Or I didn't know if she added the words as a pilot.
The word trial was used in
Trial.
the town manager's report.
Okay, so,
But not us.
right, and so.
Right.
So.
Well, and that's why I brought it up in the first place, because when I read her report, I was like, wait, that's not the same language.
Right.
And that
But I
just
think
kind of
that's
triggered the
reasonable.
whole conversation.
Right. And I could, Carmen, hi, I see you online. If I may ask you, I think the use of clickers is really a choice of the moderator at meeting. I mean, you know, the provisioning of clickers is ultimately a choice of the town, but the use of clickers, how we vote at town meeting is a choice of the moderator. Is that a correct conclusion?
Good evening, everyone. Well, it can be, but it's also open to any voter on the floor to make
Yeah.
a motion to fix the manner of voting, whether that be by electronic clicker vote or by paper ballot or by secret ballot. So it's I think that towns do this in different ways. There are some towns that still do voice votes. There are towns like ours, which have a long tradition of having paper voting slips so that you can raise those slips and do a visual count and not just an auditory count of the vote, which I think is a lot more likely to be accurate than a voice vote where people in some sections of the hall or the yays can shout louder than the nays. And some towns have bylaws that prescribe the manner of voting. And, you know, we have a lot of choices open to us. I think that if the moderator prescribes a particular means of taking a vote, it will remain open to anyone on the floor of the meeting to make a motion to take the vote in a different manner. And then we would have to have, that would be open to debate, and then we would have to have a vote on that.
So Carmen, just to ask for, so is that what in the other towns that are using clickers? That's the way that it works, is that the moderator starts by saying, hey, look, this is how we're going to do this. Maybe in a town with a presumption that we're going to use clicker voting, but someone can say, hey, no, I don't want to do that.
I think that you know, we'd have to do Cameron, we'd have to do a real survey to figure this out. But, you know, there's a little more than 70 towns right now that are using electronic clickers. I know that many of them have bylaws that allow for electronic voting or prescribe the means of voting at town meeting to be by electronic voting. And Wayland, for example, which was the first town that introduced electronic voting, had a committee that studied the situation, and town meeting enacted a bylaw for votes to be taken by electronic clicker. But there are some towns where the moderator has introduced electronic clickers as the means of voting. And I'm not aware of any town where electronic voting has been introduced where the townspeople have rejected it once it's introduced at the meeting. So it typically takes some getting used to for people, and but the technology turns out for the most part to be pretty easy, and there's still people who feel a little distrustful of it in terms of its accuracy or the potential for it being tampered with. But for the most part, it's been pretty well accepted, and people have really liked it. So it can happen either way, Cameron. You know, our town has had a long tradition of not having a lot of bylaws that govern town meeting, and that leaves us nimble and flexible and able to deal with things like, for example, pushing our town meeting this year all the way to June because of the 250th and because of schedule conflicts at the high school during the month of May. And if we had a bylaw that prescribed when town meeting would be, we wouldn't be able to do that. It also made things a lot easier for us during the COVID pandemic, where many other towns were struggling with their own bylaws and we were not. So, you know, kind of the substitute for our bylaws is our town meeting traditions and procedures paper, which is posted on the website and available on paper in the meeting, so that people understand what guide we're following and what peculiar rules we have that really apply to Concord and not necessarily everywhere else. So sorry to be long-winded there.
Great.
Thank you, Carmen. So, one second, please. So I guess my expectation is that I guess, you know, what Carmen's saying, how I interpret Carmen to say is that, you know, our town meeting has had a history of adapting, making changes, you know, tweaking things, improving. And that I would expect that our use of clickers would be received somehow by meeting, and that we would learn from it and then potentially sort of modify our use of clickers the following year. And the clickers do represent a change in the way that we conduct meeting. And as Carmen said, you know, there are some concerns about change just in general, but that, you know, the question is, how do we recognize improvement, and how do we recognize, you know, potential drawbacks of the use of clickers in however way that we use them. But I guess my underlying thinking is that, you know, if they're there, we'll use them for something, and then we'll adapt and you know, grow over time with how we use them. And then looking again at how other towns like Carlisle, for example, have had experiences with clickers, they seem to be sticking. And that, you know, so personally, that I wouldn't attach too much weight to the word trial, even though our town manager used it. because I suspect that it'll take some time and take hold. Let me recognize Katie and then Keith and then Carmen.
Yeah, I'm curious on our plan for making a recommendation for like the frequency of use of clickers. I know we discussed in the past, is that something that you think we're going to talk about like after our break?
I think
Or after the 27th?
I think we may need to come back to it. The reason I say that is because, listening to the discussion from, November 25th, I think there were at least 3 committee members who expressed an interest and explicit guidance from us about the use of clickers at meeting. And that's enough of a voice in the committee, to come back and look at that. So I think it would be appropriate. We spent a lot of time
Yeah.
talking about
I
clickers,
mean, I
right?
think
But,
it makes
but
sense.
I think it's
That's,
correct to come back to that.
I think that makes
Yeah.
sense. I'm reticent to spend a lot of money on something that we won't use a lot
Sure.
personally, and I also think having we're saying we should use clickers and having no guidance about how that is done or what we think as a committee the best way to do that would be is leaving a bit of a gap and maybe a place where the community will have the opportunity to, I don't wanna say nitpick, can't think of a better word for it right now, but of
Sure.
the recommendation, so. I think being a little bit more explicit about how we think the best way to use those would be a good path forward.
Good,
And
thank you.
maybe having that we can, state that at the select board meeting to know that that's coming.
Good, your point's well taken, and I agree. Thank you. Keith Bergman, please.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And I'm happy for the committee to have a fuller discussion at a later date if we feel we need to do more than the initial vote where from what I recall, we left it to the discretion of the moderator to determine when clickers would be used. I'd be concerned about having a town bylaw that does not let you do anything if you don't have clickers. That is to say, it's clickers or nothing, because if there's some technical issue that comes up, I'd sure like to be able to stay in the room and vote by other means. So, thanks.
Good, thank you. Carmen, please.
Thanks. I would absolutely second Keith's point of view there that, if there were a bylaw, we'd sure want to leave lots of wiggle room for us in the event that unforeseen circumstances develop. But I wasn't at the select board meeting, and so I don't know what happened with the use of the word trial. But one thing I do know is that we will be trying out a new technology this year, and we don't know whether we're going to like the technology or whether we're going to like the leasing experience or whether we're going to want to have an ownership experience with the technology we try this year or with a different one. So it's certainly a trial in that sense.
Good, thank you. That was useful, Carmen, thank you. I'd like to move forward then, unless there's any other comment or questions. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Thank you for being here today. I'd like to move forward, Phil.
Keith has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Keith, I missed you. Yeah, please.
Yeah, just before, if it's moving on from updates to somewhere else, that I just on the remote participation discussion earlier, I just took a look at the bill that was being referred to, House 4771.
Yeah,
In that bill, the word meeting is defined. It says, see section 18 of chapter 30. Well, that meeting excludes town meeting. So that bill wouldn't be regulating town meeting.
got it. Good catch, thank you. That'll get back to Eric. I think he's away for, well, he'll be back in time, and he'll be back in time for the meeting on the 27th, but we'll loop back to Eric on that, and see how that ripples out, as it were. Thank you. Phil, I'd like to go to you for an update on ADA stuff, if I may. By ADA stuff, I mean update on research for ADA accommodations at town meeting, in particular remote participation.
Yeah, so at our last meeting, I'll try and make this quick. Last meeting, Eric raised the question of what can we do to assist in ADA accommodations? So I looked into it a little bit. First of all, the Massachusetts state law is you must be present at town meeting to vote. So the whole thing that we're trying to have a whole new petition for remote participation requires that law to be changed. So you can't participate remotely even as an ADA accommodation, but there are ADA accommodations that can be made. We already have a page on our website, the town website, about accommodating people through for ADA with disabilities for town meetings. So it has to be reasonable accommodations. The law, Americans with Disability Act, requires accessible meeting spaces, accessible without steps, accessible parking spots, listening devices if people need assistance, sign language interpreter for deaf people, wheelchairs, and so on. And that can be arranged by the town ADA coordinator. And I think is it Jessica Porter?
Yeah, I think so.
It is so there's already a webpage that says that, and anybody that wants to can contact Jessica Porter for ADA accommodations at meetings. Now, the state law does allow, in some limited circumstances, remote participation as a reasonable accommodation. I think that's what Eric was getting to.
Yeah,
So I looked into Carlisle because Eric had mentioned it. And then I think Ned Perry later on mentioned Sudbury, and I looked at them too. I haven't gotten an answer from Sudbury, but I looked at their webpage. Anyways, so Concord already does ADA accommodation through the town ADA coordinator. Carlisle also accommodates, but the full explanation of what they do is there is a single person who the moderator happens to know personally in Carlisle. His name is Wayne Davis, and has made a request to the town clerk to participate by Zoom. And so that person has been authorized to participate by Zoom. And so that has been done in the past in Carlisle, and apparently is going to be done again. They also have 10 to 15 people who participate at a remote location at the Benfield Senior Housing Facility, but they have an assistant moderator there, so it's treated as if we might have people in the cafeteria or in other locations within the high school property. They just do it as a separate remote location, but with an assistant moderator. So that's the extent of what I could find in Carlisle. There is no Zoom room or ability for anybody to do it. There's one person that's allowed to participate by Zoom, and I suppose that could also happen here. And in Sudbury, I contacted the moderator, haven't heard back yet. But they have a whole webpage on the accommodations that they make available. Hearing, vision impairment, closed seating, closed captioning available for people that can't see need to see the words on the screen, and they have listening devices. So and it's if you look at the state website on town meetings, they talk about reasonable ADA accommodations, and they say it's usually done through the town ADA coordinator.
Mhm.
So that's what we are. I think, frankly, we already do what we can. And the only thing that we might do is publicize it better.
Mhm.
And so that people know they can ask for ADA accommodations.
Right.
And also, if there's any concern about there's a large population like there is in Carlisle at this Benfield Senior Housing,
Mhm.
maybe we could think about having a remote location with an assistant moderator.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Phil. Any comments? I have a few questions. Carmen, if I could go to you, please. Does the Mass Moderators Association have any practice recommendations around this? ADA remote accommodation?
This is a fairly new area for the MMA. There are not currently recommendations in this area. Anecdotally, yeah, I am aware through conversations among members that accommodations have been made for people who are physically unable to attend a town meeting, even with the accommodation of parking or whatever, whether it's for illness or for, being attraction or, whatever it is. That these accommodations have been made here and there by individual moderators on a case by case basis. And we are very much aware that the State Commission on Disability has a lengthy discussion of accommodations that should be made for persons with disabilities for town meeting, and that they take the view that it is not a violation of state law for disabled people who cannot physically come to the meeting to be permitted to be permitted to participate, including voting remotely. And I actually have a question in to the Massachusetts Attorney General's office whether they agree with that.
Good.
Because you would think that as a sister state agency, they might take a position so that everybody else knew what their view of the law is. So I haven't heard back from them yet. I can give them another poke. And we also can have a conversation with our town council on this topic. But, I think it's pretty clear that state law does require meetings to be in person. The interesting question is whether the ADA as a federal statute under the Supremacy Clause trumps state law in terms of making needing to make disability accommodations for people who can't physically come to the meeting.
Good, thank you. Bill, you saw the memorandum I sent you, the link.
Yes.
I don't know how, what authority did that have in your reading?
The authority, you mean for remote participation?
Yeah.
It, as Carmen says, there is no
Separate
authority.
agency, it's
Yeah.
not state law.
Yeah, we know from the example of Carlisle, the moderator
Right.
at least went ahead and accommodated one
Sure.
person. And, I think, there was no authority for him to do that,
Right,
but,
per se, yeah.
but he's doing it. And I
Right.
think that, it is ambiguous, as Carmen says.
Yeah,
Between what does state law require? I mean, state law is pretty clear. You have to be in person, you have to participate in person.
so Carmen, I think, it will be interesting to hear back from the AG's office. As to whether or not this agency's interpretation is valid at all, or acceptable. I think, what I'd like is that we had a playbook for accommodating, say, up to 20 people. Who are physically unable to attend town meeting through a Zoom room and an assistant moderator online, but. I think, as I hear Phil and I hear you qualifying as well, it's not clear that we should do that. So.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not what Carlisle did. Carlisle has a single
One
person, and they have a room, a physical room, not a Zoom room,
A physical room.
for the
For the
people
other-
at the Benfield Senior House.
Well, yeah, it's a satellite location,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, okay. Any other comments or questions on this? Kristen, have any?
I have some comments, so remote participation for the ADA accommodation is one section of kind of improving accessibility.
Right,
But there are other recommendations that I think this committee should make. Can we talk about them now or when, I mean, and by talk about them, I mean like list them and see if there's any comments about them.
let's come back to it, maybe, so let me think for just a second, go ahead, kind of slow down. So Phil was focused just on the question of remote participation under ADA.
Yeah.
I think, hearing, seating, ability to sort of, to the ASL support, other elements of ADA. I think it's a big piece of work for us. I think it's important for us. I know Alice has had an interest in that. I know I have an interest in it. I know you have an interest in it. Do you want
I just wanna make sure we capture the recommendations
to, okay,
that either are happening and
Yeah.
our recommendation is to better publicize it, or they aren't
Right.
happening to the degree that they're supposed to, or that we think
Right.
would be beneficial.
so, I forgot her name, Julie Proctor?
Diane Proctor?
No, the assistant town manager, is the ADA coordinator.
Oh,
Jessica Proctor, Jessica
Jessica
Porter.
Porter, I'm sorry. Man, oh man, oh man. I'm trying to think of how to follow up, I think,
Okay.
and,
As long as we capture it when we make our list of recommendations, that's.
You know,
Somebody should talk to Jessica Porter.
Yeah,
Because it sounds like, I mean, if you look at the town website, we already have a pretty extensive
I would think,
suite of
right.
things that can be done.
right,
And it's just a question of people having to ask her if they want any of those accommodations at the town meeting.
right. I guess it's three things, right? What's the status quo of our support right now? What are the shortcomings with that? In terms of, what's the unmet need?
Right.
And then what do we recommend that we do differently?
Right,
Right,
because I think
so-
we've gotten some feedback that there has been falling short in terms of, sound quality, and then Tracy Morano made some really good specific recommendations
Right.
about wheelchairs and seating, even higher seating.
Right.
So I just wanna make sure we
Yeah.
capture those.
And Alice Kaufman as well,
Yeah,
yeah. So I guess the question is, who can lead that? Just to sort of make sure we have an initial swing at that, is Alice or Kristen? Is it-
who can lead what, talking to Jess Porter? or-
Talking to Jess Porter and rolling up what we know about the status quo, what we know so far about the shortcomings, and leading a discussion around recommendations.
I vote for Alice.
Okay, Alice, you good with that? You're in mute, Alice.
I can look into all those three questions.
Okay, yeah, status quo, shortcomings, and what do we need to do differently? And part of that is talking to Jessica Porter.
First thing, talk to Jessica.
All right, thank you, Alice. And
Thank you.
and when you're ready, we put it on the agenda and spend time on it. Yeah, good, thank you. Good, thank you, Kristen. More updates, Shannon, so I know you're working on, with Carmen, working on, the town meeting 25 calendar. Is there anything you want to share at this point about, either the communication plan or the calendar, just for the committee?
Just that the calendar is gonna go in front of the select board again at their next meeting on January 27th, when you're already on the agenda for the home rule petition. It includes, proposed changes as relating to the briefing book, so we're gonna move forward with trying to print the quote bare bones warrant in the bridge. We got a quote back today and it's very affordable, which means we should be able to, transfer the funds that we allot for the mailing of the normal warrant to do that, briefing book. Because we'll combine that with the FinCom report as well. So there are some, dates shifted around with the briefing book, and then other than that, I think we bumped up the motions deadline. But the hearings were mostly the same.
So I think, yeah, Carmen, let me recognize you, please.
Yeah, I would just add, I just want to thank Shannon and a whole bunch of town staff people, including Carrie and Anthony, who've all spent a lot of time looking at this proposed schedule revision, and everybody is on board trying to make it work, even though this is a hard year to do anything, given the 250th. So it's asking a lot for the town to do something really different in terms of the town meeting schedule this year, but we're going to do it and we'll see how it works. So as Shannon mentioned, both the timing and the money seem to be in alignment for printing the warrant in the Concord Bridge, which is really exciting. And we have moved the deadlines up for people presenting their draft motions so that we can have the review meeting with town council for motions before the hearings, so that everybody will be able to present their motions at the hearings this year. And it looks like we should be in, you never know what hiccups you're going to find when you change the rubric that you're following, but it looks doable.
Question.
Please.
Shannon, do you know why, the planning board was gonna change their hearing date, and is that
Yeah,
relevant to our timeline at all?
No, it's in sync with the changes we're making to our timeline. I think they were actually just a little bit ahead of the rest of us, in that in order to do the briefing book, their hearing had to be earlier, and so they could receive comments and stuff, and everything could be incorporated in time for the briefing book.
Okay,
So now we're just, gonna do everything with the select board together.
and thank you. And I'm so sorry to ask this question, but, is the briefing book a new document that's happening this year?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
who is orchestrating that? And like, is that,
Yeah.
have we already talked about this? I'm so
So a
sorry.
little bit, it's okay, so the language has changed a bit, so Keith Bergman had
I
early
remember
on,
hearing about it, I just didn't
Right.
remember us saying, we're definitely doing it, and then like how it was gonna happen. But
yeah,
it sounds like the town knows how it's gonna happen, so,
Shannon.
okay,
I'm orchestrated.
okay. So,
Yeah.
so all the responsible parties know that this is something that they have agreed to, then? If that's the case, I don't, we don't need to
Yeah,
discuss.
well, really, the only main difference is that, I was putting the warrant together, so this is pretty much the warrant. A couple of additions to that we've discussed, like linking the article website page to each article in the warrant, and, then the only main thing is the FinCom report. And so they, are aware or are going to be made aware, but I would say Anthony has probably already had a discussion with Eric Dahlberg that this is what we're doing this year, and they're
they're
still going to
Yeah,
produce their report as they would, and they're just gonna send that to me.
Yep.
yeah,
Okay.
so rather than the FinCom report being a container
Yeah.
for all the recommendations,
Yeah.
another copy of the warrant and so on, the briefing book is the container of the FinCom report is, is in
Yep.
fact a big chapter in that.
Yep, okay, thank you.
So the big change is that, the warrant is a legal notice would be an insert in the bridge. And I'm guessing it's gonna be tiny font.
Yeah,
And one of the
like the
black,
one we saw.
and in one of the explanations in black boxes. So that's a big change, and also I expect we'll have a big, go to the town website, concordma.gov,
Yeah.
PM25, to see more, right? And so there, at some point, following the legal notice version of the warrant, you'll be able to go to the website and see more what you're used to.
Yeah.
And then in time for town meeting, we'll have the classic, here's everything in one document.
Okay.
Which is what people are used to. When we go back to the survey, the number one thing that people reference is the printed warrant.
Yeah.
So I have a little bit of a concern that, people are not gonna know that they're gonna get the big thing a little bit later than usual, they're still gonna get it.
Okay.
But, so there's some expectations management there, but the overall play is that people are gonna be much better informed.
Could the thing in the bridge have a little blurb that, and maybe you probably already thought of this, but like say that the briefing book with the full text of the warrant articles will be coming at a
Yeah,
We
later
can,
date to the house,
yeah, we
something
can
like that.
probably include something like
Yeah.
that,
Small disclaimer.
yeah.
It's a-
Point two.
yeah, otherwise it's a big surprise.
Well, cause a lot of people say like they throw stuff away, right? Like they don't read it, they use it as a paperweight or something.
Right,
But they don't realize that there's good stuff in there, or that they're going to want to reference that,
right, right.
Almost like, kind of like, what to bring to town meetings, bring water bottle and bring, this and.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
good,
this book.
thank you. Anything else in that, Sharon? Cool, thank you. So yeah, so that was all the updates. Just to backtrack a little bit on the timeline, so select board, warrant article, discussion on the 27th. we'll meet again on the 28th. I'm still working through the agenda for our work over the next few meetings. I think, you know, top of mind thing on the 28th is there anything that we need to make a recommendation around that's gonna affect the lead into town meeting 25? And I don't know what that is yet, but I certainly would welcome any suggestions that way. And then, Carmen, before Christmas, Carmen sent me a pretty thorough email about a proposal for the report structure, which we'll be delivering. I haven't really looked at it. I know Kristen as well, Haggerty, you have some ideas around a report structure as well. But I think that we need to spend some committee time looking at the report, working backward from what we expect to deliver and figuring out how to get that done. So if we don't do that in the meeting on the 28th, we'll certainly do that by the 10th. And I have a document now where I'm keeping track of the recommendations that we've made. I will go back and update that a bit to make sure that I know when we've made them and the language of the motions and so on, so that we'll have sort of a thing we can help build the report from. And I'm also maintaining sort of a punch list of things we need to figure out. So as we go forward, I'll be coming back to that a bit for more detailed updates. So moving forward to the agenda, again, any public comment while I'm just checking on the next thing we're gonna cover? Any public comment from anybody? Just checking and seeing. So the next thing is to discuss costs and considerations around different days for town meeting in different locations. And Shannon, I don't know if you've had a chance to put together some kind of a thing.
Yeah, I haven't yet.
Okay. Is that something one of us could sit down with you and kind of knock something out, or?
Yeah, I think in terms of like town facilities, I would be able to put something together pretty quickly,
Yeah.
but not so much. Maybe some of the private schools in town
Right.
or the armory. I think those are places that I'm just less familiar with, and
Sure,
if someone gave me some tips about those.
sure. Okay, so maybe we come back to that. I think the town facilities one, I'd be happy to do a call with you or something like that and knock something up. If that would be
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so I'll take it as a follow-up to, yeah. In our engagement subcommittee meeting, we talked a bit about, I'll say aspiration around, you know, what we might do with town meeting differently this year. And let me just ask the question, with respect to town meeting 25, are the dates and locations fixed at this point?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think definitely the dates, because so much of this calendar has already been specifically built out from the date. But location wise also, the options are pretty limited in town this year and that time of year,
Mhm.
so I would guess it's fixed.
Okay,
You know,
So-
apartment things.
so as we look, yeah, Carmen, please.
Thanks. I just want to note that we dedicated a lot of time and effort last year to investigating the possibility of having a session at Harvey Wheeler of town meeting. And the town's IT department did a test over there. We determined that it would be possible to link the locations using a Zoom link with CCTV, sorry, not CCTV, Minuteman Media Network. And all of that was doable, but because we could only fit 110 people in the auditorium there, and because it was going to be fairly costly when you got through with having additional town clerk staff over there as checkers and additional police officers and additional parking management and additional firefighters and so on. It just didn't make any sense on a cost benefit analysis basis to have a separate session there. In addition to the logistical problems of, you know, what do you do if you can only fit 110 people in this space? What happens when the 111th person shows up? Or the next 50 people after that, do you just tell them, sorry, there's no room, you have to drive to the high school? Would you have them sign up in advance? And, you know, that's a whole other nightmare. So it was very complicated, very costly. And in the end, we weren't going to be able to accommodate, very many people. Once the middle school is online, if we can accommodate 500 or 600 voters there, that's a really different question. But right now, I just don't think there's another space that's available as the kind of space that, you know, the kind of capacity that would make it worthwhile in terms of cost and organization to have additional locations.
Thank you. Did you have something?
No, I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I'd like to see the numbers and understand where the costs come from. I think, you know, there's a question around whether or not, we could have a town meeting, much in the model of the Benfield, facility in Carlisle. There's a question around whether we could have a meeting room, so to speak, in a private facility here in Concord. I think understanding the legal picture around that, what our obligations or what their obligations would be, what the cost of the town would be for that whole picture. I think, you know, it's one thing to make a judgment about yes or no, we would do that, or is it worth it? But I think from the committee perspective, in terms of being able to make recommendations around how we can increase accessibility, I'd like to understand better what the trade-offs really are, not having been in the room last year. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm sort of pushing to understand the numbers a bit better. So we really understand what the trade-offs are, both in terms of town-owned facilities, and also the potential for non-town-owned facilities for future meetings, where we might have many more rooms, so to speak. So that's where I'm coming from with that. Thank you.
Eric, on
yeah.
a related note, I just want to say, I went to a meeting, Kristen was there too, on Saturday at the high school auditorium. It was for the 250 safety.
Sure, the
program.
training meeting, yeah.
But I didn't remember this, because I remembered the high school always had steep risers, you had to get up there, but have they changed it? Because I ended up sitting up at the top and it wasn't, I don't remember, I didn't have to climb this time.
Sure.
What I think they might have done is added, it used to be that the risers were like this high, 18 inches or so. But I think they might have added intermediate steps on each riser. And, you know, so it's, you know, even an older person could get up those stairs. And I wondered whether we should start using that as the auditorium as the main venue for the meeting rather than the high school gym. Because first of all, it's designed as an auditorium with graduated seating and sound and everything.
Last year, we were pretty full in both rooms, right, for meeting last year.
Was there people in the
Well, so
auditorium?
last year, we tried to keep the, I think it was the first night even, we were gonna try to put everyone in the gym. And we very quickly had to open the auditorium.
But that's an interesting idea to like make it more accessible, like so make it better sound in there. One of the comments that I heard was in the auditorium, we didn't have closed captioning. So we'll have to make sure, you know, to whatever locations we have that. But what if those seats are more comfortable, or what if you could put in, you know, higher seats somewhere? And that might be harder to do there, but I just.
I think they might have fixed that problem.
Yeah, interesting.
With the risers or the steps anyways.
Yeah,
And the sound is generally better.
yeah, that's what I
there.
think might be interesting.
So-
And because you would need, in theory, fewer, well, I don't know, actually, no. I was gonna say, you would need fewer seats for accommodation, but maybe not, given our population of attendees. Sure, but I'm glad you said that, because I mean, I hadn't noticed, and this time I didn't even go climb the stairs.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
noticed it.
I don't know if they fixed it or what.
Because the seating is very steep, so,
Yes, but
Yeah, and the
now
steps
you
weren't.
can, there are intermediate steps
Yeah.
at each level.
Thank you. Carmen, you had mentioned, floated, I guess, the idea of starting the meeting sessions at 6:30 for this coming town meeting. Is that still a thought, or have you made any decisions that way? In terms of start time and end time of our meeting sessions this year, are you considering or have you made any decisions about that?
So, that is a decision for the select board. And that decision has to be made by the time the warrant gets published, because the warrant will have to announce the time that the sessions will happen. I did raise for a straw vote at a chair's breakfast, the question of how many people would rather see town meeting go from 6:30 to 9:30 as opposed to 7 to 10, with not taking up new business after 10. And it was pretty much unanimous that people would rather see 6:30 to 9:30, which was interesting. I hadn't necessarily expected that. So that will be a question that I'll bring up as part of the calendar discussion with the select board. And at the I think it's the 27th, the meeting that that the calendar will be on the agenda for. And I see Cameron's got his camera on again.
Good, thank you. Cameron, you're off mute as well, so.
Oh, no, I just was, nope, I just heard the select board thing and, yeah, I mean, you know, 10's kind of late to end, right? Or if there's no new
especially
business.
3 nights in a row, yeah.
Especially 11.
Yeah. So, I mean, yes, there's trade-offs of people saying it's hard to get there from work or et cetera, but you know, I would certainly be in favor of starting at 6:30, so.
So the
Yeah,
other thing that buys us is if we make this recommendation where, you know, the cafeteria is family friendly, it's more likely we can get people there with young kids, maybe from 6:30 to 8. Than you get them from 7 to 9 or so,
Good, thank you.
So it sounds like the select board needs to decide that, was it dictated by the schools? Like you can't get in here before a certain time? Oh, Carmen's got her hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Carmen.
As far as the school is concerned, we're in there as soon as school is done for the day, in order to begin setting up. So that's not a problem. 6:30 would not be a problem in that respect. But one thing I wanted to note is that it was a member of the school committee actually who made the observation that, you know, if we wanted to bring back the cafeteria as a location for a session of town meeting, we could consider making the entrance not into the cafeteria, but further down the sidewalk next to the small gym. And you know, that's going to be worth investigating for us. We don't have to decide that by the time the warrant gets published, because the address is going to be the high school and what rooms we use within the high school. We don't, you know, people will find that out when they show up at the building. But I think that's definitely worth investigating, because I have very, very vivid memories of how much people enjoyed the cafeteria seating setting for attending town meeting, where they could knit, read the newspaper, eat a pizza, and bring their kids to do homework.
Carmen, are they able to vote there? In the cafeteria?
Back in the day they were, yeah. And I think-
In the old building, we did have people vote in the cafeteria.
I remember that.
Yeah, and we haven't done that in the new building because we need to be able to close the room in order to take a counted vote. And the configuration of our cafeteria, given what the traffic flow is and where check-in is and where the distribution of materials is, it just, you know, by the time we got through with all the other needs and avoided passageways that the fire department wasn't going to let us put anything in, and rightly so, I'm not criticizing the fire department, we you know, we didn't have anything left of the cafeteria. You know, we could put stanchions up and, but it was like there were, you know, 4 tables, you know, we had pretty much nothing left. So we'd really have to move check-in out of that space, check-in materials out of that space. And if we did that, we could set up stanchions and ropes to cordon off that area, and we could take votes in there.
Good, thank you. I'm gonna go to Alice Coffin, please, and then Katie.
I just wanted to remind us, for those who are, I know we're going to talk about this later in the meeting today, if it's unless we're not, because Chase is not here. One of the conversations about how to improve the experience of town meeting was to make it more user-friendly by having food and other activities and a quiet space and a game space. We talked a lot about whether that was a possible use of the cafeteria. And I am recalling back in the day when we had made extensive use of the cafeteria as a second meeting space, that people did enjoy having a place where they can eat, and you can eat in the gym at the new school. And it would, if it were possible, I think that would be a conversation that the communications, or whatever we call the experiences subcommittee, might want to be involved in, playing out whether it's possible.
Good, thank you. Carmen, as moderator, you ultimately make the decisions around facilities, subject to the resources available and so on?
Yes, although I don't do it in a vacuum. The select board selects the location for the meeting, but I am responsible for making sure that we've got everything in working order, and I can't do that without the incredible effort of town staff. So it is really an all hands on deck effort, and any kinds of changes that we need, I always have to, or that we want to consider, I always have to start with town staff to look at how doable is it for them, how is it feasible from a physical standpoint, is it feasible from an economic standpoint? And then we've got to plan it. And it's I'm always the one holding the bag if there's a problem.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Although I don't have complete control over what happens.
Quarterbacking the team, as it were. Thank you, Carmen. Katie, please. Sorry, I overlooked
Yeah,
you.
no worries. I was just curious if it is a requirement legally to cordon off the room, or if we have electronic voting where a visual view of the voting space isn't as necessary, whether that might remove that as an issue.
If I may, it's an interesting question. And, we always needed to close the doors and close the area for the purpose of counting the votes. So we didn't have people coming in and going out. I think that would still be true. And that, that's for the accuracy of the vote. I think that would still be true even if you were using electronic clickers, because people with their clicker can get out of range of the receiver that would count the votes. But I'm not sure. It might be less important if you're using electronic voting. So
Maybe that's
that
sort
one
of
I gotta
testing
think
issue
through.
about, like testing the
Yeah.
distance of which the vote is recorded.
Yeah.
And then if it's not an issue, like opening the cafeteria, having like flow of people and traffic actually
Yeah.
would make, I think, a better experience, and people being like stuck in a space.
It could be part of a trial.
Exactly.
But don't vote. Good, thank you. So we've had interest across the committee in terms of looking at alternatives for meeting timing and location. I think we're working towards being able to sort of, look at apples and oranges, so to speak. But again, we're not prepared further tonight. So I think as we have more information, this is something we'll come back to.
So what other information is needed before we kind of discuss that?
So, that's a good question, right? I mean, so here's a meeting location, who all needs to be there, right? So public safety staff in terms of fire department or police. For the room there, I imagine there needs to be at least an assistant moderator. I don't know if Carmen knows this, right? So I should shut up, but as a clerk or assistant clerk or someone like that. So for any given location.
Yeah.
What's the staffing package?
Yeah.
Is a question. I think, Carmen talked about, maybe it was Shannon, sorry, talking about, looking at, using Harvey Wheeler for satellite location. The operational questions around, the logistical questions around, you know, what do we do when we reach capacity?
Yeah.
Sort of the high school is bigger than anything you can imagine, you know, for meeting, but satellite locations have that problem. So I think being able to sort of storyboard how the location would work, the operational questions, and then having, you know, knowing both what our current practices and where the unknowns are, to
Okay,
me is what it looks like. I think, you know, the question of having a private location, for example, a senior center, does it mean that there's different staffing package from the town? I don't know, but
okay, and so, that, I think that's good to have, particularly if we have like a list of like, these are the potential locations, this is how many they hold, this is how much it costs to rent them. This is how much staff, and then like you're
Yeah.
saying, is it staff per location, or is it staff per number of people who are gonna be there, so forth and so on, kind of what the
Right.
dependencies are. I think that will be useful at any capacity to
Exactly,
kind of
yeah.
generate.
exactly.
What about the meeting times? What do we need to know to discuss that in the future?
Top of mind, again, Shannon or Carmen, you know, the cost of labor, as a function of the daytime. One thing is the day of the week as well, right? Because I think you talked about staff having to come in to do setup over the weekend.
Yeah, I can't. If that's not all staff, but also I wanna say like. You know, for something like the chairs, someone just has to be at the school to open the doors and let the chairs be wheeled in. But facilities won't actually start setting up the chairs until it's business hours. But those are like just different niche things that are part of the
Right.
setup.
Right. So it's a lot to capture, right? And I think going back to what Carmen said, there's a lot of coordination involved. So I don't know how far we can go into having a template.
I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think, rather than maybe like listing out all the options, it might make sense to like. Determine what our ideal is and then figuring out what the cost differential from what we
Sure.
currently have. And then going from there, whether that's a cost that we are able to and willing to pay for that.
Yeah, I agree with you. So 3 different scenarios, the status quo, right, is Monday through Wednesday with a floating day of Thursday. Starting, let's just say it's from 6:30 to 10, right? A different one is the Sunday afternoon town meeting, which the survey was not supportive of, but I think we keep coming back to it as a question. And so the logistics of that, I think, are interesting. So the first session of town meeting runs from say 1 o'clock until 8, you know, the lunch break or whatever. And then I think a different scenario, I don't know what the third one would be, but go ahead.
My ideal would be to have. Let's say a Monday one week, a Tuesday the next week, a Wednesday the next week.
Uh-huh.
Which probably is logistically challenging and potentially costly. However. For people with, you know, children getting
Yeah.
off one night a week is much easier
Sure.
than 3 nights in a row. Having it on different nights accommodates people who may have different activities that they're scheduled on
Right.
different nights and they're only missing that once.
So until we lay it out, we don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so.
I think those are really good distinct scenarios.
Yeah.
I just wanna know, like, when we discuss an earlier time, can we discuss 6 o'clock, you know, like, I wanna see, are we gonna actually. You know, discuss that further type thing,
Right.
cause 6 o'clock start, movie in the other room, like that was something else that Tracy Morano suggested. You know, I feel like. If you're gonna get, you know, parents of younger children,
Mhm.
it's gonna be on the earlier end, and there's gonna be food, and there's gonna be entertainment there, and like to try it, and then if that doesn't work, then we're like, okay, yeah, we're really not getting like families with young kids,
Right.
6 thing, but go ahead, Carmen has her hand up again too.
And the other piece of that is who do we lose by starting earlier as well?
That would be interesting, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Carmen, please?
Thanks. I just wanted to suggest that, I'd hate to see the committee do too deep a dive into, figuring out the costs for various things, because I think that the financial feasibility thing, the financial feasibility of various options is really gonna be left to town staff to sort. And it's pretty hard from outside, outside the structured town government to really understand where all the costs are. You know, for example, police and fire, and public works are all involved in town meeting, but their costs don't come out of the town meeting line item in the budget. They typically stay in their line items as overtime. So, you know, it's very complicated. And I think it would be better for the committee to look at, if the costs were feasible, it would be a good idea to have satellite locations, and here are some possible places to think about without actually making specific recommendations, and leaving it to the town to further investigate the numbers. I just think you can really get stuck down a rabbit hole here on this.
Good, thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna move forward, thank you. Our next item, is, yeah, so the engagement subcommittee meeting, I think, we don't have Chase tonight, again, unexpected, family illness. We, had some follow-ups, I guess, I haven't seen, there was a slide deck that we were updating during the meeting. I don't know if that was Chase or Parashar who was updating that. But I haven't seen follow-ups yet from the meeting. I know I haven't looked at my individual follow-ups yet. I don't know if any individuals who were there at the meeting have had a chance to do any work that they want to talk about here. Otherwise, I'll simply push out the engagement item to the next agenda. Anything to contribute now?
I think you're talking about, like Shannon, you followed up, right, with the notes from that meeting. That went out, which is right, that separated it out,
Well,
so
there
short
was,
form video and stuff like that.
There was, Chase had put together an outline.
Yeah, that
for
he
a
was
document.
editing while we were here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
then
then-
Shannon distributed that,
Yeah,
but that was just the outline for what to send. But, I haven't seen any other, I haven't done any other follow-ups, I haven't seen other follow-ups, so I'm wondering if anybody who's at that meeting has anything to contribute now. Otherwise, we'll come back to it.
no, I think where we left that was, that, we didn't have a lot of, asides, like, hey, it would be great to have this, 30-second videos and things like that, but we don't know where content is coming from or who's gonna put it together.
Yeah.
Okay,
I know Chase reached out to Julie at Minuteman Media Network. But I can't confirm where they left that. I think they just reached out to each other and wanted to connect and float ideas with each other. But I know things kind of dropped off for a couple weeks.
Yeah, well, me too,
Yeah.
so, good, all right, moving forward, we'll come back to engagement in our next meeting. So finally, making a recommendation with respect to representative town meeting. Alice, I sent in the thing that you wrote as part of the packet, but I didn't put your name on it. And so it was, credit was mistakenly assigned to me. But the brief on representative town meeting in our packet was put together by Alice Kaufman. So credit where credit is due. And the question, I should have written out a motion, but I think, we've talked about representative town meeting here and there, and I think at our previous meeting, Phil, I think it was you that said, we need to vote on this. So I'd like to basically propose, I'd like a motion to basically say that the town meeting study committee recommends, does not recommend representative town meeting for Concord. I think.
well, could we say that we recommend keeping open town meeting? I mean,
Yeah,
I
sure.
find motions in the negative to be confusing.
Me too.
Okay.
So, I think, what we did consider though was representative town meeting, a compelling alternative to open town meeting. And so perhaps the motion would be that we conclude that we conclude that open town meeting is preferable to representative town meeting for Concord.
I might suggest that we just discuss it, and I like the idea of discussing the affirmative, and just say that Concord, after reviewing the options for open town meeting and representative town meeting, elects to maintain our current form of government of an open town meeting.
So
I just-
moved.
If that's a motion, yeah, I second.
Okay. Let me just get the language down. Can you just go back and say it again, nice and slow, Alice?
Uh-oh,
Yeah, sorry.
it's going
so
back,
that-
it never quite works.
Yeah,
After
right.
reviewing the options, after reviewing options of open, the forms of government, open town meeting and representative town meeting, this committee recommends that we maintain our current form of government and have an open town meeting format.
Are we all okay with the wording of the motion? So then those, Alice just made a motion. Can we get a second then?
I second it.
Great, let's open discussion. Summarized here just some of the points that I pulled out of Alex's research and my own research in the representative town meeting. These points in Alice's memorandum would be the substance of what would appear as a support for a recommendation in the report. Any further discussion around what we understand about representative town meeting?
No, I think the other point of support is, didn't we have the survey also that supported keeping open town meeting?
Yeah, the survey favored, I forget the numbers, but it was,
I was trying to look it up.
yeah, and between the.
Oh, yes, yeah, considerably, 712 to 265.
Yeah.
Yes, Concord should keep open town meeting, so I'm just saying that's another,
Another piece of evidence, so to speak.
Yeah,
yeah.
and so motion should actually be modified to add that, I think. So having studied the options, including a survey of town citizens or something, the town meeting study committee recommends as Alice suggested.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, keep open town meeting, but I appreciate you guys are way more specific.
No, I think Alice wanted to have
Okay.
something in there that they
Okay.
have considered
Got
here. So.
Yeah, so look, we're kind of being a little bit breezy, right, but I think we've had some substantive discussions about representative town meeting. And this motion here, and this moment here, is really just to formalize, I think, conclusions that we made at previous meetings.
Yeah.
Do we feel a need for any other further discussion, or maybe we move to a vote? I'm gonna move to a vote, then, and I'm gonna go back again, roll call for vote.
I didn't quite get for the notes, the exact wording down, including the survey language.
You wanna read
Well,
it back? or-
I'm trying to wordsmith in my own notes, but, so I didn't add in the survey yet, but after studying the options for forms of government, open town meeting and representative town meeting, this committee recommends.
Including a survey of town citizens.
Yeah.
Results of a survey of town citizens.
And in taking into consideration of the recent town survey, where 2/3 of those responding chose to maintain our current form of government, the town meeting study committee therefore recommends. And take it from there. Does that work?
I think that's too specific.
I think it's too specific. I think including a survey would be as far as I want to go.
Okay,
Okay, how about this?
Yeah.
After studying the options for forms of government, including open town meeting and representative town meeting, and after taking into consideration a survey of Concord voters, the town meeting study committee therefore recommends that we maintain our current form of government and the open town meeting.
I think it's close enough.
I can
Yeah.
make it actual English.
You could have
notes.
the current form of government, comma, and open town meeting.
I think that's a good,
Good, okay, thank you.
thank you. Paul.
Moving into a vote then, we're all clear on the motion. Keith Bergman, please.
Aye.
I guess I is in favor of maintaining.
Motion.
open town meeting. Yeah,
Yeah, in favor of the motion.
good, thank you. Katie Bresnick, please. Thank you. Kristen Haggerty, please.
Aye.
Alice Kaufman, please. You're on mute, Alice.
Aye,
Yeah, thank you. Eric Moore, aye. Parashar Patel, absent. Phil Swain, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Chase Thompson, absent, and Eric Van Loon, absent. Thank you.
I did find that information that Alice dug up very useful and just kind of over the course of this committee's work, it's been really informative to kind of hear. I think a lot of people were like, oh, we thought representative is gonna be way better, and so it was really good to get more data around that.
Good, thank you. With that, we've gone through our agenda. Before I close, I just want to ask if there's anybody from the public who has any comments, or if there are any committee members who have any questions.
I'll take the public first.
Public comment first, anybody? Seeing none and moving forward, I'll recognize Kristen.
At the end of the packet, thank you very much for putting the 2024 annual town report, what's gonna go in the town
Oh,
report.
yeah.
I had a question, because I have two questions. One, is our survey information available online?
Yes.
Do we, do we publish the results in a readable fashion?
We still have work to do in terms of, I think, a presentation quality.
Okay.
Report, but, the questions are there, the summary statistics that I
Summary.
generated are there. I don't know if the data sheet, the CSV file is there or not, ultimately it should be. So some loose ends there. But my intention is that we do a good job, communicating the results of both the October survey, and just revisiting the results from the survey from town meeting in 24.
Okay, I mean, conceivably, we could put a link in this document. The pain thing about putting a link is that links go bad over time.
Yeah,
But then, so my other question.
well, I'm sorry, there is a link to the town meeting page, our study committee page in the document.
Yes, I see
Yeah,
that. Okay,
yeah.
so that's probably good enough. My other question is, it appeared that, the information like in our recommendations, and I had this before, and obviously this is just preliminary, right? Because it's just for 2024 work, or fiscal 2020, whatever. I thought that what I saw was, it's just a 2-page report, right?
Yeah.
Which is
thereabouts,
nice.
yeah,
Thank you for making it. Okay.
yeah.
So in the first of the 2 pages, where it says views of town meeting, and this is where it was referenced that we, conducted this townwide survey on October 24th. Some of the things that you picked out, were about the dominant thing, was about streamlining one's meeting participation. I think that's really relevant. And then you chose to include over 50% of the respondents think they're spending too much time hearing others' views during deliberation. And then a preference for high interest articles. I'm sorry. So the third thing that you said was, while there is a strong support to keep open town meeting, we note that nearly 40% said, I am dissatisfied with how town meeting and how local government represents my views. And I guess I was just curious why you selected that statistic as opposed to, so that was about 377 voters. More than 400 voters said, I'm generally satisfied with our local government and the decisions that are made, and even more, 425 said, I trust the work done by boards and committees that result in warrant articles. So like, when I read 40% say I'm dissatisfied without the, other part that said, well, actually even more than that say they are satisfied, I almost feel like it begs or kind of suggests the problem that might not be there. And so my question is, so I really like that you kind of chosen certain things to highlight, right?
Right.
And in a short amount of time. And I just want to make sure they're either the most representative of kind of what we
Right.
learned or the most impactful.
Yeah. Well, that's a really great observation. I think where I was coming from with that was, it seemed like a lot to me, and it was different than the findings of the town government survey, the one that goes out biannually. There was a much higher level of overall satisfaction reported.
Interesting.
So that's where I was coming from with that. But I think if I were to edit that thing, I think it would be to provide more context, including the amount of citing satisfaction. Let me ask,
They
is it,
stick a clause in there,
yeah,
although 60% said they were
Yeah.
satisfied, 40%
yeah,
said this.
is that a showstopper for the report, does it edit need to be made?
I would not want it to be standing that the stat that comes into this report is
Okay,
only that and not
okay.
kind of the satisfaction that people have.
Okay, so understood and agreed, I'll take it as a follow-up
Did we
then.
miss the deadline now? It's
Um,
not worth delaying printing.
so I'll take it as a follow-up to get an edit to Shannon, and then we'll fix it.
But thank you for putting that together
Yeah.
and, you know, I know it's hard to be brief and you were
Yeah.
able to do it in a short amount of time.
Yeah,
So that'd be-
unfortunately, I sat on it too long to delegate it, so. Unfortunately. So with that, I think, we have no further discussion tonight. Thank you everyone for your attendance tonight, members of the public, committee members as well, ex officio members. Thank you, and we'll meet again, 2 weeks from tomorrow.
And the select board meeting that day,
Will be
there's the town
27th,
caucus that day,
Yep,
so the select board meeting is at 6.
it starts at 6, the caucus starts at
Seven.
7, so they just sort of like pause, walk into the other
Do
room,
the caucus and then.
come back in.
Epic.
So
Our
I'm sure
meeting
you'll-
is a Tuesday,
Our
no?
meeting is
Sorry.
Tuesday, the 28th. Yeah, good. All right, the time is 8:40, no, shoot, 8:37. And I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you.